Hi everyone, today we're doing an optional history lesson in the K12 first grade history OLS. So we're going to do the lesson 3.2 optional lesson called Sargon Conquers Mesopotamia. This is for whoever wants to do this lesson. You can just watch this video. I'm going to be reading out the lesson throughout the slides, and you can, by the end of the video, you can mark your lesson complete. Okay, so here's how the story goes. So we're going to learn about Sargon and how he conquered Mesopotamia, but before that there's a little bit of background information to review. So ancient Egypt used to be divided into two parts, Upper Egypt and Lower Egypt. The two parts spent all their time and energy fighting each other. But then a king named Narmer conquered Lower Egypt and made Egypt into one country. You can see Narmer over here with his double crown, if you remember from past lesson. Narmer wore a double crown to show that he was leader of all of Egypt. Okay, so this king named Narmer conquered Lower Egypt and made Egypt into one country. He wore a double crown to show that the white crown and then the red crown to show that he was leader of all of Egypt. Okay, after Narmer made Egypt into one country, the people could spend their time farming and building instead of fighting wars. As soon as the quarreling Egyptians were united into one country, Egypt grew richer and stronger. A similar thing happened in Mesopotamia, between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers. People called Sumerians lived in the southern part of Mesopotamia. You've already learned about Sumerians. They used a writing called cuneiform on clay tablets. The area where the Sumerians lived was called Sumer. Okay, so we'll take a look at that. Okay, so here are some images of cuneiform writing. You can see this is the type of writing that the ancient Mesopotamians would have done. It's done on clay tablets, writing done on clay tablets. Probably more like this or like this. You know, something like that. This gives you an idea of what kind of writing cuneiform was. Now let's take a look at the map where Sumer is. So if you remember from previous lessons, this is the Euphrates River, and this river right here is the Tigris River, and the land between these two rivers was called Mesopotamia over here. Mesopotamia literally means the land between two rivers. So this southern part of Mesopotamia was called Sumer, or is called Sumer. And you can see this in the legend. This part matching the symbols over here, Sumer. This part is going to be Akkad. And Egypt right here is along the Nile River. And Canaan is over here. Okay. Let's go back to the lesson. So the area where the Sumerians lived was called Sumer. So you can do this activity on your K12 history activity book. It's in your History 1 student guide. You can just go to this map over here and color the region yellow. Find Sumer on the map and color it yellow. Okay, so the legend tells you which area, which symbols and shapes, which boxes containing shapes matches the area. But Sumer wasn't really one country. This area was filled with villages of farmers. The villages grew larger and larger until they became cities. The people built thick walls with high towers around the city to protect themselves. Each city had its own king and its own army. The cities fought with each other all the time. We call these kinds of cities city-states because each city was like a separate country. The city-states put all their energy into protecting themselves from their neighbors. So here's a picture giving you an idea of what it might have been like in the past. So one man wanted to make all the quarreling cities into one country, just as King Narmer made Egypt into one country. This man's name was Sargon. Let's say his name. Sargon. Repeat after me now. Sargon. There are many stories about Sargon. One story says that he grew up in a palace as a servant to the king. According to this story, young Sargon was strong and handsome, and everyone at the palace liked him. He even became the cupbearer to the king. At every meal, he would bring the king wine in a golden cup. Oh, that must be an honorable job to do. Because golden cup, you know. Okay, the king's cupbearer was one of his most trusted servants because it was up to him to make sure the king's wine wasn't poisoned. The king trusted Sargon. Each day, Sargon poured the king's wine and brought it to him. And each day, the king drank his wine and thought, "How lucky I am to have Sargon serving me." However, as the days and weeks went by, Sargon began to grow jealous. He watched the king give commands and send his soldiers out to fight. He saw the king's power over the people who lived in his city. "I'm only the cupbearer in the king's palace," he thought, "but I could do a better job than this king. I would lead the soldiers into battle myself. No one would dare to disobey me if I were king." But how could a cupbearer ever become king? Sargon had a plan. He began to make friends with the most powerful people at the palace. He was polite to the king's advisors. He did special favors for the king's soldiers. He was especially nice to the commander of the army. Soon, the soldiers in the army began to think, "Sargon would be a better king than the one we have. We should follow him instead of our own king." Sargon saw his plan was working. He convinced the army to follow him instead of the king. Then he persuaded the army to kill the king and make him Sargon the ruler instead. Oh no. Sargon, the trusted cupbearer, had betrayed his king. Now he was Sargon, the mighty ruler. Do you think Sargon will be satisfied now? Do you think he'll be happy and peaceful? Think about this question, and maybe you could write down in the comments below of the video about what you think. You can ask your learning coach to help you. Let's see. So the story of Sargon continues. No, that was not enough for Sargon. He did not want to be the king of just one city. He wanted to be king of the whole land of Mesopotamia. So he took his army and started to attack the cities all around him. He fought more than 50 wars and conquered all of Sumer, the southern part of Mesopotamia, as we saw in the map. Here's so this way is north. The opposite of north is south. Here's east, here's west. So this is the northern part of Mesopotamia, the southern part of Mesopotamia. The southern part of Mesopotamia, as we can see here, is Sumer, and that's where Sargon was. With such a big new empire, Sargon needed a big new capital city, so he built a brand new one. He then went on to conquer the cities in the northern part of Mesopotamia, known as Akkad, or Akkad. So Akkad on the map, let's see. The legend says it's the one with the circle symbols. Okay, so this is the region with the circle symbols. It matches with the legend here, the icon in the legend here. So clearly this region is Akkad. And the land over here between the two rivers is Mesopotamia. So this must be the northern part of Mesopotamia, Akkad. Okay, that's where Sargon went on to conquer cities. So in your activity book, you can find this map and then color this portion pink and this portion yellow. Okay, color Akkad, the city of Akkad, pink, and Sumer yellow. And so, just as King Narmer united Egypt into one country, Sargon with his mighty army made Mesopotamia into one country under one ruler, Sargon himself. Most of the cities Sargon conquered didn't like being part of his empire. The people in these cities were used to following their own laws and making their own decisions. So an empire, you might be wondering, it's the total area that Sargon was ruling. It's all the land that Sargon was ruling. An empire is generally the area that a king rules. Okay. Sargon knew that if he wanted to stay in charge, he would have to make the people in the Sumerian cities obey his laws. And there was nothing Sargon liked better than being in charge. So he used his army to force all the people in Sumer and Akkad to do what he said. Oh, he forced them. He sent soldiers from his army to live in each conquered city. They made sure that the people who lived there followed Sargon's laws instead of their own. If the people didn't obey, the soldiers punished them. This kind of government is called a military dictatorship. Military means having to do with the army. A dictatorship is when people have to obey the government without asking any questions or telling the government what they think. In a military dictatorship, a ruler uses an army to force people to obey him, and that is a bad thing. Oh no, so the people didn't really have much choice. They were forced to obey the king, even when the king wanted them to do things that they didn't like. That's not very nice. Alright, now you've reached the end of the video, so it's time to answer some questions. Sumer is in the southern part of Mesopotamia. At first, were the city-states in Sumer friends with each other? Well, if you forgot parts of the story, you can always go back, rewind the video, and review the parts that you forgot or just missed. So, in this case, you can go back. If you don't remember the answer, but if you do remember the answer, I want you to take the time to pause the video, and you can comment down below what you think the answer to number 4 will be. Okay? Alright, for number 5, what did Sargon do? Do you remember what Sargon did? He did something really important. Something that really stood out. Okay. May not have been a positive thing, but he did do something with a lot of consequences, yes, you could say. Okay. How did Sargon keep control of the people he conquered? Again, pause the video and try answering this question on your own. If you can't, you can always go back and rewatch or listen to the story again. What do we call it when a ruler uses an army to make sure that people obey him? Now this was in the very last slides we saw. And I'll have a timestamp in the video so you can go back and rewatch parts of it, parts that you might have missed, or simply parts that you have to review. And I'll comment down the answers in the comment, but please only look at the answers, or actually I'll show them to you right now. I won't comment them down below. But please try answering these questions on your own before you see the answer. Okay, ready? Pause the video, go ahead and comment the answers below. Please don't make multiple comments, just put all of the answers in one comment. Like number 1, sorry, not number 1, But number 4, the answer to number 4 is this, the answer to number 5 is this, the answer to number 6 is this, the answer to number 7 is this. You can make it, you don't have to put too many words, but it's best if you write a full sentence. Okay. Alright, I trust you've paused the video, you've given it a go. At least, I'm hoping you at least tried answering the questions on your own, even if you did not comment down below. And now I'm going to show you the answers. Okay, so for number 4, were the city-states and Sumer friends with each other? Well, if you remember that they were fighting with each other. They were not friends with each other. Each city-state had their own rules, and they made up, every city-state had kings, rulers, and they had their own rules, and they built high walls to protect themselves from their neighbors. They weren't too friendly. Okay, what did Sargon do? Well, Sargon conquered all the city-states. Well, that's one thing he did. Another thing, he made them into one country. You could also say that Sargon betrayed the king. Yeah, that was not a very good thing he did. Or he made people, he forced people obey him. So that isn't always nice. I mean, forcing someone to do something they don't want to do is definitely bad. Okay. Number 6. How did Sargon keep control of the people he conquered? He made harsh laws and put his soldiers in the conquered cities to make the people obey him. Okay. What do we call it when a ruler uses an army to make sure that people obey him? We call it a military dictatorship. Military dictatorship. A dictatorship is when people have to obey the government without asking any questions or telling the government what they think. So they're basically forced to obey someone, whether or not you think it's right. Okay. Alright, so that concludes this video lesson. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in my next video. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe if you like the video. Okay, bye.